Welcome to another edition of the Caregivers Network podcast, the place where family and caregivers come together to learn, grow, and get supported. I'm Reggie Cunningham,
And I'm Marlon Phillips.
and each week we explore personal experiences to help us navigate and deal with the challenges of caregiving with confidence.
Whether you're supporting a loved one or working on the front lines, we stand with you. Now, today's episode, we have Miss Lisa from the Washington, D.C. area. Welcome. And if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be much appreciated.
Thank you, Marlon, and thank you, Reggie. It's a pleasure to be on today. And as I started the informal part of our conversation, it's especially wonderful to be here today, the day after Thanksgiving, during which I think we all have an opportunity to feel grateful and caring. And that's very much the theme for my experience, caregiving among challenges. I am currently living and working in Washington, D.C., where I have for many decades. I've devoted my career to public service, educated in New England, have worked, in many ways, the typical DC life on Capitol Hill in the federal government. For the last 20 years, I've been at the National Science Foundation as a civil servant, a dedicated civil servant working to ensure that U.S. investments in science, engineering, technology are made, are understood, are appreciated so that we can build an infrastructure for America. So that's what I do. And I just entered a new decade. So I'm I guess that makes me in my 60s.
Uh-oh. Watch out.
Yikes. A few years ago, I, um, my mom is closest to me, always has been my best friend. My mom, she's lived in Connecticut, and a few years ago, I realized that she was not any longer, um, it wasn't the best situation to have her be by herself that far away.
Right.
And so I chose to at first invite her to Washington for visits and then prolonged visits, and then eventually to look for arrangements so that she could live with me, essentially live with me.
Yeah.
And I'll describe that later.
Okay. Okay. Well, trust
So,
me, we understand.
absolutely. So if you could give them a little background about your family history and the caregiving business, kind of you got brought up, but then I'll switch it to the current situation with you taking care of your mom, but just so they can get a background of um, the caregiving that your family was involved with.
Sure. Since I was young, like single digit young, my parents have owned and run a nursing home, a convalescent hospital in Connecticut. They purchased a 15-bed facility, doubled it once, and then doubled it again in order
Wow.
to fill a need in the community of Cobalt, Connecticut, which is outside of East Hampton, Connecticut.
Hmm.
So I grew up in the industry. I grew up knowing about caregiving and, in fact, participating. I first worked as an employee there when I was 14 years, well, even prior as a volunteer going in to help, activities. And I was very comfortable there. I started working, at 14 in the kitchen, and was ever so impressed with employees who knew names, knew preferences, whether it was, oh, they like this, give her double of this, or whether, dietary restrictions required a certain
Hmm.
diet. So the individuality of the experience was not lost on me. And then
Right.
eventually, I worked both in the kitchen and in the office later on. Currently, my brothers run the facility. My mom sits on the board of directors, and in her stead, I'm her power of attorney. So I essentially sit on the board of directors as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I don't know. I guess I must have had a plan for you because now, if I understand it correctly, your mom is living basically with you.
My mom is living. I was very, very lucky that a man across the hall saw that my mom had been physically living in my apartment, which is not teeny tiny, but it's one bedroom. It was challenging. And so he, who coincidentally happens to be from the hometown in Connecticut of my mom,
Oh, wow.
Really?
was not living in his apartment and invited us to stay, invited her to stay in the apartment. So it's across the hall from me. And that
Hmm.
was a really terrific. She stayed for, on and off for almost a year as what was deemed a long term guest. And then I very much wanted to compensate him for his generosity. So we decided to make it an official rental. And so we're
Oh,
doing that
okay.
now. The rental just went through a few weeks ago.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Great, great, great. So taking care of your mom, what issues did you see? Is it Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's? What do you think your role
Caregiving,
is in assisting with her? Yeah.
caregiving is a balancing act. Um,
Mhm.
with individuals who have memory loss or physical limitations, it's all about how the caregiver balances. You've got to balance their need for independence and your need to help in
Right.
terms of protecting their safety, both from themselves, God forbid, hurting themselves, overexerting, you know,
Hmm.
somehow, participating in something that's over their limits, as well as from others, and I can get into that later. So you're
Right.
constantly balancing their independence, your need to protect, with then the demands and challenges in your own life. I
Yeah.
mean, you
Yeah.
are,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
most caregivers have other lives. I joked about, the decade that I now find myself in, but I still work full time and I'm proud to do so. I don't want to stop my full-time work, nor does my mom want me to. She sees it as a source of pride and
Yeah. Yeah.
and you know self-worth and
Right.
contributions. And so you're just balancing so many things all at once.
I like that because we often talk about the caregiver and what happens is the caregiver gets sick or you just get burned out just because of the natural daily chores that you have. As you said, you're working now and you got your mom. So
Yeah.
speaking of, so who looks after her when you're at work? Or are you
Um,
comfortable and she's comfortable enough with being able to take care of herself now?
she can take care of herself for short periods of time. I also supplement that care with individuals
Mm,
who, I hire people to help out. And I'm
Mhm.
very fortunate
okay.
that they're reasonably priced, they lead with their hearts, and I can supplement. I have a partner who's also very supportive and
Mm,
has set up a situation to facilitate both of our caregiving, i.e.,
mm,
cameras throughout the apartment. And there's sensors, so when she moves, it notifies us, on our iPhones as well as on our devices that there's movement, and we can just glance to make sure everything's okay.
Okay.
So let me just speak to something that we haven't talked about. The cameras in the unit. I get the fact that you want to have eyes on her, but there would be some people out there that would say, well, you're invading on her privacy, this, that, the other. I don't really subscribe to that because you're the caregiver and you just want to monitor what's going on, not invade her privacy or anything like that. So what would be your comment to somebody if they told you that?
Again, it's all about the balance. First of all, I'm forthcoming with my mom and told her that there would be cameras.
Mm,
There are also ways to set up cameras so that they're as unobtrusive as possible, i.e.,
mhm.
you can set up a camera to record from the knee down. So God forbid if she falls or he falls,
Yeah, yeah,
if
yeah.
the loved one falls, you can pick it up without being intrusive. You
Intrusive.
can have
Yeah.
sound or you can not have sound. We have it set up so that my mom, if she wants to call me, all she needs to say is, "Hey, Google, call Lisa."
Mm.
And it
Mm,
goes right to me. Or we also have a speaker that if I want to speak to her or she to me, she can do that. And it's just
oh,
based on the relationship that you've set up with your loved one. You don't want to be intrusive. You don't want to,
no.
intrude on their dignity. But I think conversations can be helpful, particularly if the alternative is that neither do you feel comfortable nor do you think they're safe to be there without some monitoring. And
Mhm.
they'd have to go elsewhere that might be even more intrusive and wouldn't
Yeah,
enable
yeah.
your active participation in their care.
Wow.
That's
I
quite
like that.
interesting because I hadn't thought about that. And I remember several years ago when my folks were elderly and we talked about putting in some type of a camera system inside the home. And my stepmother, she was adamantly against it. And so I just ended up dropping it, but I never thought about adjusting what could be seen, so that she would feel more comfortable that way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
people
motion
have,
detection works well.
yeah, and people have the devices that get activated, for instance, if they stop moving for a certain number of seconds. I mean, there are various technology is pretty good on this front. And I think
Hmm.
if you're honest, and I think if you explore the options, you can do it in a way that's protective without being overly intrusive.
Yeah, 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 yeah. But people say that, you're invading their privacy, it's elder abuse and stuff like that. And I've always thought, well, if it's my relative or somebody that I love, how can it be abusing as much as it's just a manner of taking care of them and their well-being, if you will. So, yeah,
In fact, it's interesting. The standard of care, for instance, for people with dementia
right,
is as least intrusive as possible. And the as possible, of course, is not black or white. I
Mm-mm.
mean,
right.
it's up to you and your best judgment with your relationship, with kind of how would you feel comfortable? I mean, we have to put ourselves in the other person's shoes at the same time. And it could be as minimal as, you know, a camera on the front door or,
Yes.
or a camera that's tripped under certain circumstances or audio that's certain circumstances. I mean, it's
Well, if they have dementia or something like that, sometimes they can't tell you what's going on, articulate what's going on. Case in
that's
point with
right.
me, and I'll say that, my mom was living with me, and just one morning, about 3 o'clock in the morning, my alarm system goes off that the front door was open. So I get up, and my mom is down there, fully dressed, packed, ready to go somewhere. And I was like, Mom, what's going on? She said, Oh, well, so and so and so and so, they were coming to pick me up. So I just opened up the front door to go out and look for them, and I didn't see him. Well, the alternative, if I hadn't had the intrusion system, I wouldn't have won first, nor she opened the door. Second, she still had her faculties enough to say, wait, maybe I need to go back inside, so which she did. But the technology and the intrusion system alerted to me. But moving forward from there, I put deadbolt locks on all the doors and put a camera, on all of the front door and the back door. So, like you said, if I got motion in the evening, it would pop up on my TV. So I'd rather be prepared than come downstairs and she's out wandering in the street, because that goes a whole different direction if it happens. So
That's right.
I can appreciate being proactive
And an
for sure.
individual has to know the physical abilities of their loved one.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
if they're in a wheelchair, I mean, how is that? Now, sometimes adrenaline can give more energy and more spunk, if you will. So you have
Right.
to, yes, I mean, you're not wrong in imagining all situations, but it's again, it's a theme, it's a balancing act that you're
It's
constant. And
this.
dementia is not one diagnosis or
No.
one situation. There is an
Yeah.
enormous range of,
Yes.
and short-term memory does not equal incapacity or a lack
That's
of
right.
cognition. I mean, it's a whole range of abilities and limitations.
Mhm.
So you've got to be cognizant of that and seek expert advice whenever you can. I mean,
Yeah.
Alzheimer's is one thing, is one point on if you consider it a spectrum of
Right.
you know, cognition,
Right.
cognitive ability. And you have to be respectful, and things can change. And also, what can change is time of day. People with memory issues or cognition challenges during certain times of the day can get, you know, these challenges can get more severe. So you
Yeah.
have
You and I
to
talked
know
about
the
that. Yeah.
person and know their both limitations, strengths, and
Hmm.
abilities.
And their
Well,
and their and their and their routine.
yeah.
Go ahead, Reggie.
Listen, let me expand on that just a little bit because I know someone who is now entering into the stage of caring for his mother. How do you suggest people go about finding that expertise that they need to care for a loved one with dementia or Alzheimer's?
I think you need to get a diagnosis from a medical professional and
Mm.
preferably a team. I mean, you need a neurologist to do testing, to do memory issues, as well as the physical aspects, physical therapy, occupational therapy. You need those individuals to evaluate the living situation and help you best prepare and create a safe environment that's not overly taxing. And you need a little bit of training. I mean, it could be talking to others like we're doing today, listening to the experiences of others and seeking the expertise of some of the organizations that do this for a living. I mean, you're not the first person, this person, me. No, we're not the first people to encounter these things.
Right.
And they're tips of the
Mhm.
trade. In fact, even this morning, when I mentioned to a friend that I would be, speaking on this issue, she said, "Oh gosh, you lead with your heart. You're perfect. You'll be great." No, 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 no. She sent me, no, no. And it's interesting. She sent me something from the Alzheimer's Association, the top 10 things to do for people with Alzheimer's, and I'll share it with you. But what
Yeah, go
was
ahead.
what
Sure.
was funny, like not funny, but funny, quirky funny, is that she said, my partner and I, we failed everything. And
Oh,
so I'm kind
wow.
of questioning. And okay, let me read, and then I will.
Yeah, because we sound like we might have to have her on. And I'll
Well,
just say
I
this
mean,
for everyone. You cannot fail at being a caregiver because there's no book, there's no script. Every situation is unique in and of itself. So we need to have a chat with her. You can't fail. Yeah.
well, but you can fail. I mean, no, no, your heart is not enough. You have to try hard to be
Yeah. Yeah.
informed
Yeah.
and to be careful. I mean, I'm not saying you have to tread on eggshells, but you need to prepare yourself to some degree because it's another life and they're depending on you.
Yeah.
Similar
Yeah.
with
Yeah. Yeah.
being
Yeah.
a parent. I mean,
Right.
you know, in some ways you show up and that's half the battle, but you need to be careful and diligent as well. Okay.
All
Living with
right.
dementia. And this is from, la, 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 carescan.com is the name of the thing, but I think the advice is excellent. One, agree, never argue.
That's
Two,
true.
divert, never reason.
Mhm.
Three, distract, never shame. Four, reassure, never lecture. Five, reminisce, never say remember.
Mhm.
Six, repeat, never say I told you.
Wow.
Mm.
Seven, do what you can do, never say you can't. Oh, do what they can do. I'm sorry. Never say you can't. Ask, never demand. Encourage, never condescend. And reinforce, never force.
Mm.
Wow.
Nice. Very nice.
What
So
are
my
Tremendous.
so
the
my reaction to her is I felt, you know, grateful from her, observation, um, that somehow I was adhering to all of those. And I hope I
Absolutely.
try very
Yeah.
hard to adhere to all of
Yeah.
them. But I mean, let's be honest, even with the best intentions, you make a mistake. And I would
Yeah.
argue I make at least one, two, three of those errors at least once,
Well,
probably every day.
let me
The
clarify when
best
I
you
say
can.
you can't fail, meaning that when you become a caregiver, you're going to do everything in your power from your heart and everything you can in a situation that you've never been in before. So it's not, in my just my opinion, you're not failing because it's something that you've never done and you're doing the best you can, but you're
Yes.
learning from it.
Yes.
And if you take the mindset of failing, then the person you're caring for, like this just said, you can't convey, uh, for lack of a better word, a vibe where they feel like, you're slowing them down or incapacitating you or something like that. So that was my point,
Oh,
meaning
no,
you
no.
can't
And
fail
the
because,
point was
it's
not
no
to,
book. You're going to make mistakes, but you're going to grow from them and share them like we're sharing to keep you going.
oh,
Does that make
absolutely.
sense?
Oh, yes. And my point was not you can fail, so be careful. No, it was just that luckily there are resources from which we're
Mhm.
always charged with doing our best, but luckily there are resources out there in which we can do our best even a little bit better because our
Mhm.
Yeah,
best can be informed.
yeah,
And our best, and that's what I would put the 11th thing about dementia is to get help, get
yeah.
some, seek resources. And
Mhm.
maybe 12 is to be easy on yourself, be responsible,
Yes.
Ooh,
but
that
not,
right there.
yeah,
Yeah.
It's
be
hard. It's hard.
responsible, do your best. But if you mess up, keep going, keep trying to
Yeah.
correct and
Yeah.
improve.
Lisa, I'm going to have to ask you if you don't mind at some point sharing that list with us because
Absolutely.
eventually we want to create a library and be a resource for others going through
Oh,
the
yeah.
things that we're going through. Now, I don't know how much Marlon has shared with you what I go through. I'm on the other spectrum. My
So
daughter
go
is
ahead.
autistic.
Why don't you introduce and tell her kind of your scenario, and she might find it interesting.
And I just sent it, by the way, to you, Marlon,
Okay.
that list.
Okay, thank you.
And
Yeah.
real quickly, Lisa,
Please.
I was my daughter was born autistic, and my wife and I have raised her and raised a son. Now, my daughter turns 34 next month, but I lost my wife 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago. So all of a
Oh, so,
sudden, I'm a single parent.
wow.
And, like most families, my wife did the bulk of her medical care. And I found myself woefully inadequate in trying to deal with her needs and her medical issues. I tell you real quickly, one of the things that I had a problem with was I didn't know if my wife had ever taken her to a gynecologist, and I knew that I needed to have that done. And to be honest with you, Lisa, I'm still embarrassed to this day. It took me 9 months to figure out who my wife's gynecologist was because I was still grieving and I just didn't know. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, we've got insurance, call the insurance company.
Oh, that was smart.
Yeah, but it was smart 9 months later.
Well,
So when I called that and set up the appointment for my daughter, I had no problems with setting up that appointment. But first, I broke down in tears because, I realized that was something my wife would have done. And then, I realized I'm all right doing almost everything for my daughter, but I'm not comfortable going into the examination room with her, and she would need to have someone going into the examination room. So, but I was blessed that I had someone in my life at the time who volunteered to do that. But those are the things that we come across, and
Mhm.
even to this day, I still feel inadequate in knowing her situations and what needs to be done with her. And I'm on a different spectrum because yeah, she's not cognitively available to make poignant decisions for herself. So I've got to do all of that. And because of her autism, she doesn't like being out of a routine. And, I'm going through it right now because her friend's not with her. And I've been catching, to be honest, catching hell the last couple of days.
Yeah.
So yeah, I feel you. I understand it. I appreciate your list because that's helpful for me also.
Yeah. So let me just elaborate. So last week we interviewed three young ladies. What they all had in common was their children had ADHD and autism. Two of them were okay, but one of them, who was the most animated, she just was in denial. To your point about, getting help and listening to other people's advice. My question is, what do you do if you're trying to give someone advice and they don't listen because they were in denial? Now, the young lady, she was blunt about this. She said, I was in denial. And she's a Latino background. And there were some cultural issues with, the condition of her child. Her husband, he was in denial, she was in denial. But her mother, the grandmother of the child, kept telling her, look, there's something going on. You need to get it checked out. So she would go to the doctor to get it checked out. They would tell her it could be autism or ADHD. She's like, no, I don't believe it. Okay. So she's believing that he's going to get better as they get older. And I guess the symptoms got worse. So finally, at which age, Reggie, maybe like 2 or 3 years
Yeah,
old.
something like three, I think she said.
So at 2 or 3, her mother was just insistent that she go to the doctor and get checked. And she finally accepted that, her child had ADHD and autism. But it took a while. So some of the resources that were available that might have helped her, gravitate and hold to it, she just put in denial. So do you run into people in your business with the family? Have you run into people that are in denial of the circumstances that
Um,
their loved one is in, or
I think in the convalescent home business, when individuals enter the nursing home, there's an automatic acknowledgement that they need to be there. Now, it's a rehabilitation hospital and caring hospital.
right,
So there are cases in which people could stay for short term, become rehab,
right,
undergo rehabilitation and return. I mean, this image of a certain hospital being the end point is not necessarily the case. However,
mhm,
there is a reality that there's a point at which older people can no longer care for themselves. And
right,
so I think there needs to be a no judgment zone. I think providing third party resources,
mhm.
accessible things, what to look for, anecdotes, things that might resonate in a non threatening way. If it's someone close to you, um,
Well, it's funny
sharing
because you
those
say that about
resources could be valuable.
the non-threatening way, because this lady was like, you are casting dispersions on my child.
Well,
That's my child. I know them. You don't know them, and why are you saying these things about me? But she was in denial.
but
But
that's
to
also,
your
there's
point about
also,
people come to the nursing home, they may feel the same way. Is that what you're saying?
um, I mean, I think at that point there's less of, I mean, having denial around a child, right? A blank slate, a
Right,
child. I,
right,
I'm not speaking clinically. I'm speaking
Right.
just
right.
intuitively.
Absolutely.
I would think would be more common. They're young. It's different. You've had, only a minute to, to parent them basically. I mean, they're very
Mhm,
young. Um, and there's also, my theme is balance. There's also a balance of not prematurely trying to slap a label on a kid. I
mhm.
mean, there's all sorts of things that set the path if you do it yourself. I mean,
Right.
I can feel for a parent wanting to take a little more time to explore, not to judge, all of that. It's just a balancing act. So you hope
Mhm,
with expert advice, with resources, um, eh, you know, giving them a chance to mature, grow, not be labeled, not be typecast or stereotyped, and uh, balances the need to address real issues in a timely manner when they can
mhm.
be when they can be addressed.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, I think so when you're a kid, to your point, they're just developing, and this could just be a prognosis for the kid. But when they, excuse me, get to the age of convalescent, then you're already past. So whatever is there has been developed, and it's a part of them as you try to figure out, the best care path for them.
Yeah.
And
But the other side of that, because
um,
I experienced it, the other side of that is that the sooner you realize that there is some type of an issue, then the sooner you can get resources to address that in a
right,
child, you know.
Right.
So yeah, I can understand that. So,
yeah,
Yeah.
but,
yeah.
But
but yeah,
So
being called different as a child is that has its own issues. So
yeah,
hopefully with expertise, with people really focusing on these issues, we can balance and make sure kids who need assistance get it in a way
right.
that's not, you know,
well,
that not
the one of the ladies
labels them for life.
told a funny story about the kids, the kids with Alzheimer's and ADHD. They went on like a field trip or something like that, and some parents were, a little uncomfortable because of kids, just normally autism, ADHD. There's some things that just happen in their lives every day, and they all have a that scenario. But she said just one of the kids just came up and told basically all the adults and everybody else, listen, so and so, they're just different. Okay. We just see them as different. We don't see the clinical or the diagnosis.
Mm.
We just see them, they just do things a little bit different. So we're all kids, basically parents, chill out, relax. Our friend is a little different and we don't have an issue with it, so why should you? So she said after the kids said that, everybody, all the adults just kind of calmed down and they enjoyed the rest of the trip. So, you know, so yeah.
So I think
So
so
go ahead.
caregivers need to learn, and they probably have to help others have an appreciation for some of these issues as well.
Yeah, yeah. So I know when I took care of my mom, relative to time, she was a full-time job and I had nurses coming in, but I was able to get away sometime, but my mind, my day-to-day grind was different for two fronts. One, she was with me in the house. Second part of it was just finding caregivers. The two paramount things. You got to find somebody that your mom likes, and you got to find somebody that's willing to work with your mom or your kid in the condition, knowing where they're going with it and what you're dealing with. Because it took 4 or 5 months for us to find the right person. Because
Oh,
my
yeah.
mother was a little honest in her 90s. I didn't like this one. I didn't like that one for just in business world, they said, "Mom, where you just pulling these excuses from places unknown? You just okay." So we finally got a couple ladies that, for the main thing, they were both the same size. Some of the women were a little bit. My mother was like 5'7", 5'8", something like that. So when she met a couple ladies from the Philippines that were about the same size, that kind of like settled the dust. And Emily ended up being with us like 7 years, but there were times, where I come home and Emily's ready to go. I mean, packed up, and I'm just looking at her. I said, Emily, what's going on? Lester Phillips, your mother. I said, what happened? She said, I just gotta go. So, my response after getting all this together was like, well, are you coming back tomorrow? That's the most important thing. And she said she would, but then I would go up and talk to my mom about it. Some things, I don't know whether she had selective memory or she just didn't want to negotiate the conversation. But the long and short of it, it was like, I'm 92 years old and I don't need anybody telling me what to do, this, that, and the other. I was like, Mom, but I'm paying for an assistant to take care of you. Well, I didn't get to 92, but not knowing how to take care of myself. That's that dementia. You know what I'm saying? Well, if you could do it, trust me, I could spend this money a lot of other places, and there'd probably be a nice car out in the driveway right now. So,
You know
but do
what?
you get into?
That's kind
Go
of a
ahead.
good segue. Lisa, let me ask you, um, how did you go about finding resources for a part-time caregiver for your mom?
Right.
Well, trust is imperative.
Hmm.
And it
Yes.
is the
Yes.
case if the personalities don't meld, it's a non-starter.
Yeah.
Um, where I live, there tends to be a lot of caregiving needed. And so there's quite a network of experienced caregivers who help, who can be hired and who help. And they
Yeah.
have, you look for references, you talk to people, but clinically, the most prepared, helper is not necessarily the best. So you just have
That's
to, you know,
yeah.
um,
Yeah.
you have, and certainly you have to meet with the person first and
Mhm.
together you have to introduce and you
That's
have to
right.
introduce the caregiver to your loved one in their full sense. Not this is someone you
Yes.
care for, but this is in my case, this is a woman who 5 years ago was a dancer who competed in community dance competitions.
Oh,
Here's a
wow.
picture. Yes, it was in the past, but it wasn't that long ago in the past. She loves music. She loves, presenting a view to the caregiver of the full person, not just
Mhm. Person
their
right now.
medical needs or their
Yeah.
care needs. And in fact, I do that with every new doctor. We dress up, we go, they get to meet her as a human,
Wow,
as
I
a
like that.
person who has dignity and grace and a full range of likes and dislikes. Doesn't mean she can't get testy. If people are in pain, they will lash out, and that pain can be emotional or it can be physical. I
Yes.
mean, my mom will say things like we ended several sessions with a physical therapist the other day, ended because her time, was done. She was deemed sufficient to move to the next step and not in-house care. But
Right.
she said, she looked at him, she said, I'm thrilled. This is your last time. That's great. And then I looked and she goes, not because of him, not because of you. No, and his name was Angel. And she would say, you're not an angel. You make me work and you make me work hard. Now,
Yeah.
when she's not in pain, she could reasonably understand that Angel had
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
angelic qualities of really caring and pushing because it's going to make her feel better. And she could
Yeah.
acknowledge it. And it helps if the person has a sense of humor or if you can spark their sense of humor. And that is knowing when to crack a joke
Right.
that's not at their expense, but rather they can laugh with you.
With you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
my mom the other day, again, in the midst of her pain, called me a name, which was not flattering. I then went on to mimic it a little bit. And you got to be
Yeah.
careful because again, you don't want to make them feel stupid. So
I
a
hear
lot is
you.
knowing the personality of your loved one, and
Mhm.
personalities can change when they're challenged with,
Yeah. So we
memory
preach
issues. It's
patience here.
embarrassing not to remember things.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
we preach
hard.
patience because you got to be patient. If you're going to be a caregiver, you got to be patient
Well, you got
because
to be,
sometimes, go ahead.
yes, patient, and you've got to at least find that nugget of humor in all of it. I mean, you've got to
Yes.
try.
You
Doesn't
can't be
mean,
thin-skinned.
Mm-mm.
yeah, and
No,
it's
Mm-mm.
you
not
can't be
always evident,
thin-skinned.
and it's not
Yeah.
always there. Let's be honest. You don't want to be laughing up on
Well,
something serious.
Well, you
here's
Try
also
your
have to,
best.
good.
give yourself some grace because we are all human. And then every once in a while, we'll feel some kind of way when,
Yes.
things are directed at us unflatteringly,
Of course.
Lisa, I get fired almost daily from my daughter, you're fired. Okay. They keep going on,
Yeah.
So,
Okay. I guess I have to, hone up my resume. I mean, you think, no, maybe I could get a job as a garbage man now. I mean, you've
Yeah.
got to just be creative in your response and try to make them laugh or try to,
Yeah, but I don't know. Sometimes they don't even remember. Because my mother used to be
absolutely.
in denial. I was like, Mom, why would you say this or that? She said, Oh, I wouldn't. Son, I wouldn't say that. I said, Mom, okay, fine. So what I would do is record it sometime.
Ah,
And I played it back for. I said, Do you remember this? No, I don't remember that. I said, Well, here you are, right here. This is what happened. This is what you said to Emily. Oh, I get the crocodile tears. Oh, I'm a Christian woman. I don't think I should have said those things. I said, Mom, I love you, honey. It's just sometimes, with the dementia, I can't believe I said that. Is she coming back tomorrow? I was like, I think she'll be
yeah.
back tomorrow. So when we want to share something with you, Lisa, that we share with everyone, and that's this. We pray that God gives you strength because you need strength to deal with the patience that you have to have with being a caregiver. There's no, there's no in between. If you don't have patience, you'll get patience as a caregiver. So we just pray for strength that God gives it to us and we can deal with patience if you don't have it by the time you get into the caregiving.
Lisa, that
I'll
came
take
from
all the
me.
prayers you got.
Yeah. That came from me when I first lost my wife and dealing with my daughter and her temper tantrums and whatnot. Me praying to God for patience. And after a couple of months, I told a friend that, and she said, No, you never pray for patience because God will test you.
Test your
And
patience.
God has tested me. So I no longer pray for patience, I pray for strength.
I guess you can attest to patience as well, huh?
Again, another balance, right? Your own relationships. And that includes, with your spiritual relationships as well as
Oh
your
yeah. Yeah.
relationships with your loved ones.
Yeah, because I
No,
know a
it's
couple times if it wasn't for God, my mom might have been out of here. Out. I'm being cynical, but yeah, a couple times, she packed her bags, she's saying she's leaving and get to the steps and how am I going to get down? I said, you know what? This is your plan. So you were going to leave. So are you, and then it just goes from, are you asking me to leave? I said, no, but I mean, you got up out of bed, got your walk, you got your cane. I mean, so, I mean, what do you want me to say? You need to tell me to come back to my room. Okay, go back to you. Smooth sailing. I'm laughing because, you got to be whimsical with them when they're like that and not give them the blues because they'll just, like you say, they'll get down and stuff like that. So I learned that from some of those experiences that just keep it lively for yourself too. That's not to say that you're not going to have a drink when you get done getting them squared away, but, you know, for sure. So, what would you share with anybody coming into caregiving? Any advice that you would give somebody that's just starting to experience it?
lead with your heart, ask for help, give yourself a break, realize it's all about balance. Seek some of the professional resources to help empower you to do the best job you can, and humor. I mean, try to just do the best you can.
So, I got a tough question here or comment that people wrestle with. So, home care versus and or assisted care or retirement home.
Again, that's a decision that caregivers and their loved ones have to make together.
Mhm.
There's no one size fits all, and there's no, uh, it depends on so many factors: how blessed you are financially,
Yes.
how capable the human is, what kind of a scenario can you create so that you address the needs in a way that's as unobtrusive as possible.
Mhm.
What their team of trained medical professionals say and the advice. And medical people will look at areas, deem them safe or not safe. We'll give
Right.
you tips, we'll give you advice. I mean, there's a whole you've got to judge for your own self, again, as informed with people who do this for a living.
Mhm.
There are, associations that do this. Particularly with the internet, you could talk to
Yeah.
people all over the place who have experience.
Right.
And again, it doesn't mean their experience is going to translate to yours, but you just gather, you become a bit of an investigator and try to make the best decision with your heart, with your brain, with your resources, um,
Yeah.
and with the timing. I mean, things will change. You've got to realize that things can change,
Yeah.
that no care scenario is one size fits all, that there's going to be some experimenting that has to be done.
And it's the long game. It's not the short game. When you get into
Yeah,
this, you
that's
got to
a good way
ride
to
the
put
whole
it.
thing out no matter where it goes. Yeah.
That's it. I
Yeah.
mean, and there are some caregivers who are awesome, both caring for their own family member, but also either in facilities or hiring the,
Right.
awesome. I would like to say the individual, I've seen, growing up in the nursing home
Right.
area, I've seen staff members hold in their arms residents on
Right.
holidays, um, who nobody, for whom they didn't get any visits from loved
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah.
um, and I've seen others, you know, discuss scenarios with loved ones. And
Right.
I've seen some of the best, and I don't think I've one-on-one seen the worst, but you just have to,
Yeah.
you have to
Well,
interview. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
back to your point about the cameras, you just jogged my memory. the other part about cameras is that I find that, whenever I want to leave mom in somebody else's care, you're always questioning that whether or not they're going to take as good a care that you would.
course.
But and you on the road and you just, you're calling back all the time. I know on this particular time they're doing this, that, the other. But the other benefit of cameras is that you can see the interaction with the nurse and your loved one, or just what's going on, or how they're treating your loved one. They can make you feel comfortable by seeing everything is fine, or they can alert you that, this is not the right person for what I have.
That's
But you just
right.
jog my memory when you said that. So the cameras have a unique purpose. And I like the comment that you made of being able to go two-way, because sometimes the care person can just hear your voice and they'll tone right down.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
right. And I mean, I tell every person coming in that this is the situation.
Mhm.
Um, I've butt in to say, come on, mom, don't give them a hard time. I know you can do better.
Yeah, yeah, you're a
Oh, one
coach.
thing, let me raise another point that's worth, I think, raising at this point in time. Sometimes there are people who hold different views in how you should care for your loved one,
Mhm.
Mm.
and they will not be shy in expressing those views. And sometimes they could either provide good advice worth
Mhm.
consideration, their
Yeah.
insights, their experience, their background worth consideration. But sometimes there could be those who cross the line. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
really, that's another balancing act. How do you extract the good advice, use it to explore more? But how do, when somebody possibly takes steps to interfere with the safety and comfortable status of your loved one, how do you
Mhm.
say back off?
No, I
And
just tell them quickly, you fired. Okay, that's the
well,
end of that right there. I mean, so the twofold. I'll give you twofold. So one is my mother got sick during COVID. And you were here in the DMV, and the rule was that if you could bring a person to the hospital, but you could not come in. You could bring them to emergency, but you couldn't come in. So she wasn't feeling well. I went over to Sibley Hospital and I asked the emergency people, I said, listen, I got a 90-year-old mother, and she's having issues. I need to bring her to the emergency room. Uh, am I going to be able to stay with her? He was like, well, the rule is you could drop her off. So I got to tell me drop my 90-year-old mother off in a wheelchair and leave her to your care. So that was the general scenario. So I just conveyed to the guy, that I was her caregiver. And what I didn't want to happen is I bring her there, you see her condition, and you either misdiagnose because of she's not on a medication, or you over medicate because of what you see, as opposed to her being able to express how she feels. Long and short of it, I went and got her, bring her back. And the young kid said, I will get you back in the emergency room with her. Now, if she has to stay, what goes on, if you got to stay in the hospital, I don't have any control over. So long and short, we get back there, they get her in, and she was just having some infections and stuff like that. They get her on the antibiotics, fluids, get her blood pressure down. And we've been in it for like 6 or 7 hours. Well, finally, the trauma nurse and trauma doctors come in, and it was a male and a female. They were husband and wife. They both were the trauma care for the emergency room and stuff like that. The irony of it was that their son was working the front desk of the emergency room because he was home from school, the University of Virginia, because they had closed school down for COVID. And he had told them about my mother. And as it worked out, he was her son. So I got the best treatment, and I ended up getting her out at around 11 o'clock. But my point was that you have to be able to get in and tell this person, whoever's going to give you advice or ill advice, listen, I know my loved one. I know, when they're off and when they're sick. So, you can't come in here in 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 visits and start, as my father would say, dictating policy here. I know you may do it that way with your loved one, but we're going to do it my way here. So I've only had that conversation one time. Everything else, my mother and I, we kind of concurred with. But the key is just to know your loved ones so that if they're having an issue, you can express to them, no, this is not their normal behavior. They're off meds or they're not feeling well or something like that, as opposed to just a person coming there trying to diagnose the whole situation and they're not really familiar with how you manage it.
Yeah,
So,
that's a good point, Marlon, in that, we have to remember that we are the caregivers and we've got to be able to vocalize and the needs of the person in our care. The medical staff is not going to know everything. We can't be
That's
afraid to let them know. And
right.
I've had conversations with doctors before, and I have had to be extremely assertive. I remember when Artesia was just a small child, and she had to go to the Chicago Children's Memorial Hospital, and the doctor caring for her dictated what was going on. And I listened to him, and I was getting ready to tell him, the things that we saw, and he shut me off, and I had to stop him. No, I am this child's father. I have the
Mhm.
PhD in this child.
Right.
And he proceeded to tell me, well, you can get another doctor. And I had to tell him, yes, I can get another doctor. And I can go to your superiors and report how you are treating her parents. I'm not
Mhm.
having that. So
Mhm.
yeah, you have to learn to be assertive and not be impressed by letters behind a name. You have to
Mhm.
be adamant about the person you're caring for. So,
So one other quick point. So one of the caregivers that ended up coming with my mother, she was taking care of a couple. They both were in their late 80s. So their children were doctors and nurses. So when they would come by to see her once the parents got sick, the nurse that took care of them every day, she had input to tell them what was going on as she took care of them every day. She was there with them for 8 hours every day, both of them. She said, but Marlon, they would come in, and because they were doctors, the children were doctors, they didn't want to listen to what I had to say. She said, I'm a certified nurse practitioner, I'm an RN, and I'm with their parents every day. And they would just dismiss what I
yeah.
had to say, basically telling me to be quiet because I'm only a nurse. But in the end, a couple of times when they called the ambulance and the ambulance got there, the first thing they want to do is talk to the caregiver who called to tell
mhm.
us what was going on before the kids get there and start dictating, telling everybody what to do. And she said, on a couple of occasions, they just asked me questions and they were like, well, has she done this? Has she done that? Does she have fluid? So it didn't even necessitate going to the hospital. Now subsequently they both passed away and she ended up coming to take care of my mother. But that's the kind of stuff that, you know, everybody with those credentials may not necessarily have the right information, and you might need to pay attention to the one that's with them every day. That was a lesson that I learned right there, which transcended to me. I know how she is, and I can tell you in a heartbeat if something's not right with her. So, yeah.
Absolutely. That's it. It's also about balance. No, those closest, knowing preferences, knowing your loved one, always staying open to
Mhm.
hear the view of others,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
knowing where those lines, knowing when, no, I'm not in denial. This is what I know
Right.
versus, so it is a balancing act. I mean, knowing that you could have a blind spot, listening, making sure you don't, and then knowing when they've crossed the line or when they near the line to be
Mhm.
very firm and communicative so that your view, the view of those closest, are heard or appreciated.
Sounds good. Yeah.
Well, I've learned quite a bit, Lisa, and I
Yeah.
think my sentence of the day is that caregiving is a balancing act.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you something else. If you were teaching a college class, you could hold my attention.
Thank you. So I can tell now, I'll tell my mom that I did an interview, and guess what? All that money she spent on my education was well spent.
We will send you a copy of this, but I want to just
That
make
will
a
make her
comment.
most happy. I mean,
We will
seriously.
send this to you here later today, but just one quick note, then I want to go offline with the conversation. So we are thinking about AI applications, and we might want to talk to you and your brother about the application, and maybe do a beta site with your facility, see if it
Hmm.
makes sense with the AI.
Interesting. The first instinct is AI to me is not authentic.
Mhm.
First instinct. So it'll be an interesting conversation because you've got an image to deal with, and then I'm curious how it will be integrated.
So no,
Can
no,
I
I
just,
would get your blessing first to have you
no,
explain.
no,
I'm just talking generality, but yeah.
you know what? I do want to add one more thing that I
Okay.
think is so important for your own mental health, but also for the person you're caregiving. Look for the opportunities to be joyous and to celebrate. I started with the mention of Thanksgiving, but
Yeah.
look for, and one of the suggestions on the list of things that I can pick up on are look for opportunities to reminisce. Grab
Hmm.
a picture and tell a story. It's known that pictures can conjure up memories, good, positive
Positive
things.
memories.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
This reminds me of the time we did this. Often memory, short-term memory could be a problem, but long-term memory could be intact. Thinking
Hmm.
of ways to celebrate both achievements, but fun memories, things that bring joy to both of you, because caregiving should be about joy as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow, Lisa, this has been very insightful, and I'm
Yeah.
thankful that we had you on today. So, we're going to wrap this up, and that's it. That is it for this edition of the Caregivers Network. If you like what you hear, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. If there's a topic you would like for us to explore in the future, please add that to your comment. You can also check us out at cgn, the number one.org, and leave a request, a question, or a comment. Thank you for joining the Caregivers Network.
And remember to shoot for the stars. And even if you miss, you'll still be amongst your friends.
That's it, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Lisa.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much, Lisa.
Yeah.
Thank you.